Okay, it's running. So you're here in Hamburg, sitting here with Stelarc.
Yeah, well, the recent internet performances have involved remotely activating the body in some way using a muscle stimulation system. The first of these was a performance called Fractal Flesh for Telepolis, where we electronically linked the Pompidou Centre in Paris, the Media Lab in Helsinki, and the Doors of Perception Conference to this body in Luxembourg. And people in those three cities could access my body through a touchscreen interface, and they could program the body's movements remotely. So by either touching the muscle sites of the computer model or by selecting from a library of gesture icons, pasting these icons together, pressing play, and then a few seconds later the body moved in Luxembourg. The more recent performances have involved using internet data. Ping Body used a ping protocol, using the sort of the reverberating signals bouncing off different internet sites, measured in milliseconds. This information is mapped to the body's muscles through the stimulation system, and the body moves according to the sort of ebb and flow of internet data. The parasite performance, we constructed a search engine that live during the performance scans the internet, selects images off the web, anatomical, medical, robotic images of the body. These are optically displayed on the heads-up display, and the images you see are the images that make your body move through, again, the muscle stimulation system. So JPEG data from these images is mapped to the body. Voltage, 0 to 60 volts, is squirted into the body's nervous system. The body responds to the images that it sees. In this performance, it was like constructing a crude, external and extended nervous system for the body. So the body sees and the body moves, not through its mere biology, but through this internet image data. Yes.
Related, but
Well, you know, I've always been interested in interfacing the body with technology and kind of extending it in different ways. I've used muscle stimulation for about 13 years, and about 4 years ago I made a multiple muscle stimulation system, programmed it with a computer. Wasn't too much of an imaginative leap to plug in a modem, and then this resulted in the possibility of remotely activating the body. It's actually a very strange feeling, you know. You watch your body move, but you've neither initiated that movement, nor are you yourself contracting your muscles to produce it. In other words, you have a kind of split physiology. Your movements are the movements of a remote agent with a displaced desire. The sounds that you're hearing in this performance are sounds that are produced by sensors attached to the limbs. Proximity, pressure, flexion and accelerometer sensors measuring the velocity, the proximity, the movement of the fingers and the limbs. We also kind of mixed in sequences of real audio sound. So as well as the search engine doing a live scanning and selecting of images, we also had sequences of live real audio mixed in with the sensor sounds. The performance was uploaded to a website so that here people could watch the performance live on the internet. What was interesting too was that the search engine finally discovers this website, and the images that we uploaded become the images that then in turn recursively move the body. So it's kind of an interesting and unexpected aspect of this 3-hour performance. Of course, the body was quite fatigued after this 3 hours. It was constantly moving to the sort of 0 to 60 volts of muscle stimulation. The sound, in fact, was rather powerful. So if you came into this performance, you would be hit by this wall of sound that made your body resonate. So the acoustical manifestation of these visual gestures and this internet interface was really important. The only thing that I could control was the movements of the third hand. All the other limb movements of the body were internet actuated. The search engine functions on a Linux, Unix system, and then that's fed into a Mac graphical interface with the vermal object, the vermal stick figure. Then serial port signals go to the muscle stimulator, and then 0 to 60 volts go to the different muscle sites on the arms, legs of the body. This is a kind of a nice... So the video switching is done by the body with sensors on the arms, legs and head. So if the head is tilted, if the arm lifts up or the leg is bent, images switch from live video feedback from the Mac computer, the search engine software, cameras positioned above and in front of the body, and a live moving handheld camera. So the body is fed the internet images. This is the muscle stimulation box, which lights up. This is some of the recursive images from the website, now controlling the body's movements.
Future projects?
We're now working on a kind of reverse motion capture system, where instead of the physical body capturing a virtual body and mapping its physical movements to this virtual entity, the reverse will happen. This avatar or agent, which is has some artificial intelligence, is semi-autonomous, will be able to perform in the physical world by appropriating, by capturing this body. So again, this is done through the muscle stimulation system, but here the agent or the avatar can function in the real space and the physical world rather than the opposite way around.
Is there any end goal you want to reach?
End goal?
Yeah, some final.
Well, I guess it's this idea that sort of the internet becomes this kind of external nervous system for the body, connecting remote bodies. The notion of a cyborg no longer being just this single kind of Terminator 2 body, but the idea of a cyborg as a kind of cyborg system. In other words, a multiplicity of bodies, spatially dispersed but electronically connected by this internet nervous system. So the cyborg becomes this extended operational entity, not simply of a single body with implants and attachments.
What do you think what's happening in the art world today, like contemporary artists, what do you think about their work in global body art? What do you think it's what's happening worldwide now?
No, I mean, I think what's important is this, this notion of interfacing and interacting of technology with the body. So the body becomes this kind of extended sort of system of operation. I mean, every time we pick up a telephone, we can extend and project a human presence to remote locations. This idea of perhaps creating a kind of phantom presence, the idea that if we had not only visual and acoustical feedback but tactile and force feedback, then we could in effect create a powerful phantom presence of that remote person attached to your body, like a phantom limb or a phantom body effect. You would have an aura attached to your body, but this aura would not be your aura, but the aura of another elsewhere.
Ready?
Bit of everything.
Yeah.
It's just a sort of simple Betacam SP unit environment with a mixture of all different kinds of machines. So basically a lot of discrete logic. True, test ironics. Very good studio cameras, and the intention is to develop a software connection between the motion control rig and the silicon.
Who are you?
Läuft.
Hi, my name is Tanya, and I'm involved in the new website of the ZCAM. And what I'm about to show is a sort of demo version of the new website that's going to be on the net, let's say, beginning of May, middle of May. So what you're seeing right here is the intro page, and the whole idea of the design is that we tried to take the architectural structure of the ZCAM, and that means it's about 10 light wells with a cube in front of it, and this was the idea that you zoom into the light wells, so the whole design refers to the architectural structure. Right here we have an English, a German, and a Japanese version at the moment, and there's going to follow a French and a Chinese version. So maybe I'll just click and show you. Right here there's the German version. Maybe I should show you the English version, but I guess you will understand anyway. So right here, this is the main menu, the head page. So you have the ZKM sort of as a roof, top of everything. So you can go in here and get basic information about the ZKM concerning its organization, the staff, and the imprint, of course. And right here you can go to the departments. The ZKM has 7 or right here 6 departments, official departments, including the 2 museums and the 2 institutes. So from the design, if I go back, you sort of zoom into the light wells. So by zooming, the picture changes, and this is how the color codes come up. So if I go to the Media Museum, as you can see, I zoom into the whole color again. And right here I have the possibility to have an insight of the whole collection of the Media Museum. So if I click on Camera Silence, for example, I get a picture and a little text explaining. And right here I can see where it's positioned. And the idea is that the color codes are given through the light wells, and we'll try to avoid to work with a lot of pictures, so these colors are solved with style sheets. And I was not really involved in the programming, but I did the design of it, so can't give you an insight on that. If you click on web projects, what is working at the moment is the ZKM Panorama, and right here we are working with QuickTime VRs that you can really have a look and see how the ZKM looks like, and you can navigate around and see the architecture again, and right here you see your position where you are. And these QuickTime VRs are linked to each other, so you can really navigate around the ZKM and get a real feeling how it looks. Of course, this is not a real image. This is sort of, can also be a sort of documentary. This is how it used to look, like say, in 5 years or so. So if I go back to the head page, again, this is the basic architectural structure. This is the huge building. And if you click on information, you get the basic information about the opening hours at the ZKM. And again, the idea of the design is that we take the information desk downstairs, which is really a half-round wooden shape. So it was more, we wanted to have a homepage that also makes sense from the design and from the colors, and not, really notice that it works fast and that people really get the information they want. So this is like a demo version. Although it's already on the net as a demo version, we hope that it can be finalized by the end of May. And there's going to be a database which is especially going to be programmed for this website as well. So we wanted to give the user more than just a nice web page. We wanted it to make sense from the color codes and from the whole design look. And we wanted to avoid this idea of having these structures that work like menus, because this is the architecture and it's its own structure. We did not want to use drop-down menus, or we wanted to create our own structure. from the design and from the navigation. And what you see right here is a specially programmed small navigator where you can have a horizontal navigation between the different pages. So if you click along here, and then let's say you go inside the Media Museum again, and right here you see where you are. You're on the third click hierarchy in the first page, so you can again have a horizontal navigation. I think this is a very important issue in the internet, exploring new ways of navigating, horizontal navigation instead of a back navigation. So you can easily go back to the main pages or even to the head page with a small navigator. Yeah. Of course, we're on the World Wide Web, and our URL is zkm.de, and I hope you have a look inside.
Okay, a little story about myself. Jeffrey Shaw, media artist, at present director of the ZKM Institute for Visual Media in Karlsruhe. I'm Australian born, came to Europe in the mid-60s, lived in London for a while, lived in Amsterdam for about 20 years, and moved here to take this position at the ZKM in '92. What do you think? So, my work. Sort of mid-60s, late 60s. My work could be sort of typified as being a form of expanded cinema. I was doing performances, I was making some film, but I was focused a lot on, let's say, happening type of events, expanded cinema events where projected imagery, which could be film imagery or slide imagery or light show imagery, sort of just a kind of eclectic mix of projected imagery, were sort of manipulated by real events, like projecting on smoke, on steam, on fire extinguisher foam, and also with some performance elements with people. And at that time, late 60s through the mid 70s, I was doing a lot of work with inflatable structures, kind of responsive, kinetic, could say even interactive architecture. But at that time, the notion of interactivity was, the term was more, sort of audience participation, sort of participation architecture, participation events. And then through sort of the mid 70s through to the early 80s, I was doing a lot of audiovisual experiments. I was doing multi-screen slideshows. For instance, together with Genesis, I did two tours with Genesis. The last tour with Peter Gabriel, The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway, and then the next tour with Genesis. Experimenting also with, let's say, early forms of virtual reality, virtual projection techniques, with slides to start with. For instance, at the Biennale, the 9th Biennale in Paris. I'm also doing some experiments with lasers, sort of immaterial, three-dimensional sculptural forms, and by the end of the 70s, I was starting to experiment with the computer-generated imagery. And from the very beginning, these these computer-generated images were sort of transformed into, let's say, virtual reality modalities of presentation. Almost some sort of head-mounted displays, but anyway, experimenting with ways in which to get the computer-generated image out into the real space, sort of augmented reality strategies. So from the early 80s onwards, I was sort of almost exclusively working with computer-aided systems, with 3D graphics, though seriously limited by the computing power which was available at that time. So an early piece, Points of View, was just running on an Apple II computer. 100 straight lines, sort of with a sort of 8 frame per second frame rate. But still, it was 3D, and it was interactive, and it was, and one could navigate in this very, very simple graphic space. Around the middle of the 80s, I was also doing a lot of experiment with interactive video discs. I did an installation also in Paris at La Villette, called Inventer la Terre, which was a kind of a periscope system where again the image was projected out into the real world of the museum, again a kind of augmented reality strategy, but getting the images off video disc. And also in this work, one of my sort of recurrent themes, the panorama, was sort of established. In this work, for instance, you could turn this periscope around in the space and explore a 360-degree virtual panorama, which was all around the column, and then choose places in this panorama where you wanted to go, and then sort of make sort of journeys to different virtual sites. By the end of the 80s, the sort of first generation of silicon graphics machines became available, which allowed me to focus more intensively on synthetically generated 3D, interactive 3D spaces. So this led, for instance, in 1988-89 to the first version of the Legible City, where the viewer can bicycle in a virtual space, in fact virtual cities, Amsterdam, Manhattan, and then later Karlsruhe, where the cities are sort of built up, instead of out of buildings, they're built up out of text. So it's like a three-dimensional book, where as you bicycle through the city, you sort of cut and paste words and phrases and build a kind of concrete poem, in a sense, in the path of one's journey. Well, then I would say, yeah, through the 80s and into the 80s, early 90s until now, I've been sort of really focused largely on computer-generated installations, say virtual reality installations, though not using head-mounted displays, but usually designing new kinds of interfaces and new kinds of environments in which these works can be experienced. And also experimenting with new visualization strategies. For instance, EVE, which stands for Extended Virtual Environment, is a virtual reality visualization environment which returns back to my sort of inflatables days. It's a big 12-meter inflatable dome where the viewer has a tracker on their head, and the projection equipment actually can move the projected imagery anywhere over the surface of the dome. So it's a kind of a hybrid between a head-mounted display where you control the movement of your window of view in the space, but also kind of omnimax cinema, because you have this big dome and you are projecting a big image on the surface of the dome surface. This is a work which is actually still ongoing. We are doing some technical developments on Eve here at the ZKM this year, and I'm hoping to have a new work ready by the end of this year for this environment. Another recent work is called Place, a user's manual, which is this notion of panorama, a big 360-degree projection screen, projecting an image of about 120 degrees onto part of this cylindrical screen, and then the user, the operator, actually being able to rotate the image in this space. And this work actually is a little in the sort of modality of panoramic painting, or rather panoramic photography, because most of the basic material for this work comes from panoramic photographs which I shot, which are then texture mapped onto cylinders into a virtual world which one can explore. Well, a definition of virtual reality. Well, I'd like to suggest a sort of spectrum of virtual realities which run all the way from all the traditional art forms. I mean, any attempt to represent the world, any, let's say, artistic attempt to represent the world is in fact an activity of generating some kind of virtualization of the real, and then establishing relationships between this virtualization and the real space. Just looking at a painting constitutes a space of virtual reality. But one can also say that virtual reality today is very much tied to the kinds of technologies we have. So we can talk about virtual reality in relation to the specific machineries we now have to represent reality. And this then constitutes our sort of our current understanding of what virtual reality is. Synthetically, computer-generated spaces, or computer sort of augmented real spaces. It's a bit the same as with the word interactivity. I mean, interactivity also is something which is a common denominator in the whole history of art. There is always an interactive relationship of the viewer with an artwork. But now we can talk about interactivity from the point of view of the specific machineries of interactivity that the new technologies have given us, which give us then a specific flavor of interactivity, a direct physical way of interfering, modulating, reconstructing the image. And this is somewhat unique, somewhat different, let's say, to earlier forms of interactivity. And the same with virtual reality. These new technologies give us a very unique flavor of virtualization of the real. Yeah, what can I say? I mean, when one talks about virtual reality in advertising, or the virtuality of the world of advertising and publicity, one sees also there a strategy of transformation and manipulation of the real. but one also has to look at what is driving this. I mean, there are sort of levels of virtualization that are driven by certain, let's say, criteria or certain goals or certain sort of cultural, commercial sort of priorities. What can I say? I'm not especially a big fan of the virtual world created by advertisers, since I tend to find them often very cynical and very reductive. And I would say that the work of artists constitutes a fundamental counterpoint to this cynicism and this reductive approach. Artists tend to want to empower the viewer, empower the viewer's imagination, and open new realms of experience and new realms of understanding. And this is not exactly what let's say, the sellers of a product necessarily want to achieve. But it's maybe interesting still to understand the levels in which there is some kind of crossover between these two spaces. I mean, for instance, the legible city was somewhat inspired by the early days of computer graphics, where there was this sort of compulsive fascination with flying logos. And on the one hand, all these flying logos were somewhat sort of banal, but on the other hand, there was something interesting in the sense that the flying logo embodied the way in which text was taken off the surface of the page and floated or launched out into space. In other words, text became objects, became architecture, became sculpture in space. And this is what the flying logos did in a way. It established a new space, a new world in which text existed. And in that respect, the legible city was a kind of response to that. It said, okay, well, now text has this autonomy. One can build whole cities out of text. One can see the whole city as a space of text, as a space of reading. I mean, each time, is driven by a kind of euphoria of its feeling of being in the present and its sense of the uniqueness of the present. At the same time, each time, and when I say time, in fact what I'm talking about is a culture. I mean, each sort of, the culture of a generation is both a euphoric experience and a kind of sleepwalking, because to a certain extent we are both the creators and also the slaves, the inheritors of our time. We are sort of born into it and we inherit it. And I would say the issue in each time, in every time, is the ways in which one can understand what's going on and establish some level of creative location in that time and creative responsibility in that time. So one maybe could reduce things to sort of two sort of simple axes. One axis is an axis of how to say, kind of sleepwalking, a kind of being just absorbed in the momentum of the present. And the other axis is the axis of trying to wake up to what is going on and identify oneself and locate oneself and establish, let's say, a modality for articulating, I suppose, one's identity and uniqueness in that time. And I would say within the space of the new media, there are forces which are claustrophobic, yeah, and blinding, and there are forces which are which offer, I would say, even radical strategies for new kinds of experience and new forms of creativity. And it's a little bit of a struggle. Stars, virtual people, virtual pop stars. I mean, one of the sort of basic issues in the history of art is the issue of representation of the figure. I mean, what, 50% of all paintings are paintings of people? Maybe even more than 50%. It's always an issue of how we see ourselves, how we represent ourselves. We represent ourselves in painting, we represent ourselves in photography, in the cinema, and now we represented ourselves synthetically with synthetically generated characters. All these representations are mirrors. They are ways in which we redefine ourselves or reconfront ourselves. I'm interested in synthetically generated figures to the extent that they are unique forms of self-representation. At the same time, the synthetically generated figure is, let's say, severely constrained by the technological machineries which construct it and run it. So in a way, the synthetic person is both a mirror of ourselves and a mirror of the machineries which we have created, which in turn create such figures. So they are very valuable to tell us who we are and who we are not, and how good our machines are or how poor they are. And it's certainly, let's say, an interesting field of experimentation. My interpretation on I mean, basically, modern and postmodern man and woman, is, in a very fundamental sense, our relationship to machines. I mean, we have built a machine world, and it's the machine world which is most fundamentally the ambience in which we live. Now, there is no doubt that the machine-made world is, if one compares it with the natural world, one is shocked by its limitations and by the poverty. On the other hand, one is impressed by its capabilities too. So one has a sort of love-hate relationship with these machines. They are powerful, and yet they are still very meager, very sort of naive. And we are impatient. We are impatient because we want these machines to become sophisticated. We want them to be able to embody our deep and complex desires as human beings. So we struggle against them, we struggle with them, we struggle against them, and we try and push them to the limit. And we also want to, let's say, explode them. So in that sort of love-hate relationship, there is a kind of creative and there are creative, destructive forces. Even the destructive forces are creative forces because they basically are the forces which say, this is not good enough. We have to. It's always let's say, a struggle to transcend the limitations of these machineries, to take them where they aren't, where they're not yet, where they haven't yet arrived. And on the same level, in the sense that one wants machineries to embody the complexity of our experience and the complexity of our desires, we also, and that complexity involves, let's say, the whole spectrum of possible, let's say, mysticisms or transcendental experiences, or really deep experiences. And so, of course, we search for connections, and we search for revelations that we're on the right track. So maybe we want to sort of discover that the chip has, let's say, mandalic qualities. But I think this is a very superficial sort of notion. But it tells us something about what we want. And what we want is that indeed these machines have the complexity and the sophistication to embody the complexities and sophistications of our own being. And of course we are fascinated by the complexity of this, the growing complexity of this technology, because it seems to point in the right direction. It seems to tell us, yes, here is a machinery. I mean, the sort of the famous image of Charlie Chaplin caught in the industrial machine in modern times is the image which tells us very bluntly, these machines are not us. In fact, these machines are against us. These machines are dehumanizing. And so we abandoned, we sort of abandoned the Industrial Revolution. We lost our sort of initial euphoria about these machines as the sort of prosthesis of our sort of inner life. And now we look at chips and computing technologies and think, well, are these the prosthesis that are going to take us where we want to go? I don't know, I'm not really a futurist. It seems to me that that cultures change, and sometimes they change very fundamentally, and the changes can be so radical that a person in the future may not even be able to recognize a present like we have today. It may be as indecipherable or mysterious as our relationship to archaic cultures. Something lost and something where we just struggles to understand what these people thought and how these people felt and what they were doing. Maybe that's how it will be 500 years from now. This will be some kind of sort of archaeological struggle to reconstruct this time. And I also have the feeling that we as humans, we mutate. I mean, we stay the same, but we mutate. And maybe we won't stay the same. I mean, maybe indeed the biotechnologies will even transform our bodies, so that the future body will be a different body. But certainly till now, the body has been fairly constant, but other things have changed radically. And yet, I tend to think that in all cultures there is a commonality of being born into a time and of a certain struggle, a struggle to understand one's being in the world. And that each culture finds its own ways to identify itself and finds new ways to make life a brilliant experience.
Kan ik bij jou slapen dan?
Ja, ik wou even verrekenen dat... kijk, ik weet nog waar ik op kan trainen. Ik wil mijn computer wat van mij en dan doe ik vandaag wat groepjes maken.
Ja.
Dan huur ik gewoon een soort films, met videobanden.
Ja.
Ik heb zo'n videotheek, 10 met 5 banden. Doe je dat? Hello, my name is René Bosma, and this is my colleague Arno Koenen.
Hello.
We are both media artists, and we have been working together for 5 years now. We started working at the Art Academy, doing several performances and making a movie. After graduating at the Art Academy, we did a postgraduate course on new media and computer graphics. And we realized several projects in those 2 years of that study. And after finishing that study, we went to Rotterdam and we work at V2 organization. They gave us a space to work. And we are realizing a project now in which we translate pixels into little pieces of glass. And maybe can Arno explain what the idea behind this all is?
Well, like René said, we are transferring something coming out of a computer, a virtual image, into a classic glass mosaic, or terrazzo in English. The idea is that we have a 250 by 250 dpi image, no pixels, pixel image, and each pixel is transferred into one of these little tiles. These are all the colors available in terrazzo material, and we imported it in the computer as a color palette from 48 colors, and it was dittered by a Floyd Steinberg diffusion pattern, and the result you see behind us. So it's basically a indexed color image in tiles. And the thing you see over here is Lara Croft. It's an image from the Tomb Raider 2 game, and we chose her because we wanted an image which was more or less coming from the virtual reality world, the world of computer games, and it had to be also an image which related to the tradition of terrazzo. So old terrazzo squares mostly portray Roman kings or gods from myths. So we needed a contemporary myth, contemporary icon, and she was almost perfect in this image, especially because she really looks like a cyber Madonna, and well, that's basically the idea behind this work.
Okay, Lester. Yeah.
Okay, to realize this image in total, we made 100 schedules, each representing 1% of the total image. And what we actually did was we selected every pixel that looks like this. So this is 1% of the total image. Each black square or multiple black squares represent a few pixels of a certain color. The number written underneath corresponds with the color code of, for instance, A410. The thing to do is now put an overlay on it, and there we go. So C1. In this way we placed all the 62,500 little pieces of glass onto wooden boards like these.
So it's actually a very long-term way of, very intensive way of creating an output of a computer.
Yeah.